coordinator for the CDSC. There are a couple of things that I want to check in about before we get started today. So first of all, I would like to thank our co-organizers and sponsors, the Organization for the Graduate and Professional Students with Disabilities. And I'd also like to thank all of our co-sponsors for this event, the Department of Gender, Women, and Sexuality Studies, the Institute for Advanced Study, Multicultural Affairs, the Department of Political Science, the School of Social Work, the Bakken Center, the Disability Resource Center, the Department of History, the Women's Center, and the Leadership Education in Neurodevelopmental Disabilities and Related Disabilities. So thanks for joining us for this event today that we call Disability Justice in Campus-Wide Organizing and Activism. The first thing I want to check in on is about access needs. So our folks who are hearing, can you hear me okay? And our folks who are seeing, are you able to see the captioning? Okay, another thing I want to mention about the captioning, this is a live captioning event using CPrint, which means if we talk too quickly, it'll change from using specific words to specific meanings of words. Are there any other access needs that you have that we can accommodate before we get started? Are the lights okay? Okay, also feel free to be in this space in whatever way you need today. If you need to stand up, stretch, move around, anything that'll help you feel more comfortable, please do that. And then finally, we also have some note cards on the end of every table with pencils. So we will have time for Q&A at the end of the panel, but if you don't feel comfortable raising your hand or speaking out loud, you can write down on the cards and we'll come and collect them. And then same thing if you have any other access needs that you don't want to vocalize, you can write those down on the cards and we'll grab them. So now I want to start off by letting all of our panel members introduce themselves. So does anyone want to start? Just go for it.
Hi, my name is Oliver Brunson. I'm an access assistant at the DRC.
Hi everyone, my name is Angela Carter. I am the co-chair and founder of the Critical Disability Studies Collective.
Hi, I'm Sarah Hebner, and I'm the president of the Organization for Graduate and Professional Students with Disabilities.
I am Cassidy. I am the president of the Disabled Student Cultural Center.
I'm Anthony Lawler. I'm the vice president of the Disabled Student Cultural Center.
Great, thank you all so much for being here today. And before we get started with the questions, I just want to talk a little bit about the 10 principles of disability justice created by Patty Byrne and others at Sins Invalid. Oh, yes, we have access copies to the 10 principles of disability justice, as well as a copy of the questions. We can pass the questions around for today if you'd like those as well. But Angela will walk around and hand out those copies. So Sins Invalid is a performance art community in the San Francisco Bay Area that promotes and celebrates artists with disabilities and centralizes people of color and queer and gender variant artists. Sins Invalid started to articulate the next wave of movement in the disability community by thinking about what comes with and after disability rights. So these 10 principles that I'm going to lead off with are a framework for thinking about how we can ensure disability communities are inclusive and offer opportunities for disability movement builders. So the first principle is intersectionality. The very experience of disability is shaped by race, gender, class, gender expression, historical movement, relationship to colonization, and more. We must consider how intersecting identities can be a site of privilege or oppression. Leadership of those most impacted. Queer, disabled, non-binary femme writer Leah Lakshmi Pipesna Samarshina, I can spell that, Samarsinha, writes, inclusion without power or leadership is tokenism. Inclusion without leadership is not acceptable. To truly have liberation, we must be led by those who know the most about these systems and how they work. Anti-capitalist politic and recognizing wholeness. We resist conforming to the capitalist normative level of production. We value people as they are and for who they are, and understand that people have inherent worth outside of capitalist notions of productivity. Commitment to cross-movement organizing. Disability justice shifts how social movements understand disability and contextualize ableism. Sustainability. We pace ourselves individually and collectively to be sustained long-term. Our embodied experiences guide us toward ongoing justice and liberation. Commitment to cross-disability solidarity. We honor the insights and participation of all of our community members, knowing that isolation undermines collective liberation. Interdependence. We meet each other's needs as we build towards liberation, knowing that state solutions inevitably extend into further control over our lives. And finally, collective access and liberation. As brown, black, and queer-bodied disabled people, we bring flexibly and creative nuance that goes beyond able-bodied and minded normativity. To be in community with each other. No body or mind can be left behind. Only acting together can we accomplish the revolution we aspire. So I just wanted to start off with this framework, and we can continue to think about these principles throughout our talk today. So now I'd like to move into the panel session and start with our first question for each of our panel members. Oh, and I'm sorry, I forgot about that as well. We also have a copy of the questions if anyone would like to see those. So the first question that I'd like to ask for all of you today is, how are you involved with disability organizing, activism, action on campus, and what inspired you to get involved? It feels like
So I started graduate school here in the fall of 2016, and I knew that as a person with a disability, I was really going to need a good support group. And so I went on the U's student union page, and I started looking for student clubs that would be in some way supportive of me as a graduate student. And I found nothing. And I went to a Council of Graduate Students meeting, and Ryan, my co-founder, was at the same meeting, and we asked who here is representing people with disabilities, and the answer was a resounding silence. So we co-founded the Organization for Graduate and Professional Students with Disabilities to try to address that lack of support and advocacy. So I've been very involved with that from the beginning, and we've grown from 2 members to over 50 in about the last year and a half. I also serve on the Graduate School's Advisory Board, so I was recently able to get up and talk to all those faculty members about some of the issues grad students face, and got a very good response from them and a lot of support. So we've been getting good support from faculty and admin, and we also have been funded by the Council of Graduate Students. So it's been really exciting to kind of see these things come together and hope that what we're putting in place will prevent people from dropping out of the pipeline from undergraduate to faculty.
Hi, this is Angela speaking. So similar to Sarah, I was a disabled graduate student, but I also study and do work in critical disability studies, which is a field of disability studies that looks not just at studying disabled people, which is an important work, but also looks at the category of disability in society and looks at how we think about disability conceptually and how we think about how disability intersects with race, class, gender, sexuality, citizenship, and all of these other categories that are sort of made up or are systems of meaning making in society. And so when I came to campus, I was sort of stuck in a bind where I found, and I came to campus in 2009 as a graduate student, so a while before Sarah. I found not only no other disabled graduate students or support system for disabled graduate students, but I also, or little support system for disabled graduate students. I also found very little people doing the scholarly work around disability that I was looking for. And so I founded the Critical Disability Studies Collective as a place that could help me do the intellectual work that I was looking to do and build community around the academic study as well as the personal connections and the community around that work. Because I see building curriculum as deeply intertwined to building personal community and building the social support that we need to stay in the system or in the academic support that Sarah is talking about. I think curriculum is a big part of that as well.
Hi, this is Anthony Lawler. I joined a similar group to the one I'm in now at UMD, and it was called Access for All. And so when I left UMD, I was looking for a similar group at the Twin Cities campus, and that's how I found the Disabled Student Cultural Center. So I joined as the spring of last year, and in my time for Access for All, I began to realize how important it is to how education and awareness is something that can really help turn the tide of people not knowing anything about disabilities, and how really that can, if I've just come across in my own life how helpful it would have been if someone knew like things about, you know, vision or different aspects of disability. So I got very passionate about ways to educate people and how that can really help people all over understand what it is to have a disability and how to help that.
So this is Cassidy. When I started attending undergrad here in 2015, I was just looking for something, I guess, with something to do with my identities, whatever, you know, all of them as they are. And you know, the DRC was great with accommodations and everything, and at that time, that's all I wanted. That's all I needed. I didn't think I needed a student group or organization where I could meet other people with disabilities. And anyway, so I didn't have a group or anything, and then the end of my second year, I got an email from DRC that was like, hey, would you be interested in applying for like a position with this student group that I had never heard of, which was the DSCC. And so I was like, sure, why not? So I did, was given a position as the finance director, because money's cool. And so that was this past fall, started with the DSCC, and it was not in a place that I thought it should be. It was not really focused on the things it should be focused on, which is disabled students. And so through a whole long year of work and all of that, I think we got it to a place where, you know, we're here now. You know, we're able to actually attend things like this. We're actually able to put on events and programs that, you know, do focus around disabled students and disability on campus. And so, you know, going from not having a group to now being the president of a group on campus, one of the few, as y'all were mentioning, you know, it's really shown me that it needs to be more present in all conversations, that disability is not its own thing, but it's not, it often gets overlooked, and it pisses me off.
This is Oliver, and I began undergrad in 2016, and I started getting services from the DRC. and I've worked with different consultants there and gotten different accommodations and met a lot of other people who have, and I was finally in a position to actually work for the DRC and learn that I was passionate about doing this type of work for a community that I didn't really have growing up, but that coming to the university provided me with and allowed me to explore my own identity.
Great, thank you. This is Sarah again. The next question that I want to ask, I think we kind of, some people touched on a few of these, but do any of the 10 principles of disability justice stand out to you as particularly significant or especially important for campus-based organizing or action? I can read them off again too, like.
I can start, but I also want to say that when we picked these 10 principles, we picked it knowing that not everyone in the room would be familiar with them or familiar with them as presented in this framework, and that that's okay. That we think that a lot of disabled people live with these ideas in various presentations or in various forms, even if they're not used to it in this language. And so if the people on the panel or the folks in the audience during Q&A want to talk about it in a different language, we invite that. So I'm going to talk about it in this format because I'm a big nerd and it really excites me, but I want to invite everyone in the room to talk about it in whatever way feels most comfortable to them. So of the 10 principles, as Sarah explained them and as the handout explains them, the one that I think is most important for the work that I do and the work that I think is done on campus, the two that I think are most important, at least that are standing out to me in this moment, are number 2, leadership of the most impacted, and number 9, collective access. And I think that those go hand in hand. All of them are really deeply intertwined. But in the work that we do at the CDSC, leadership of the most impacted means that we recognize that we are situated with lots of privilege and that we already have made it on to this university campus. And so that means that there are lots of disabled folks that can't make it to campuses, that can't make it to institutions of education, of higher education. And so we try to uplift the voices of folks in community and uplift the voices of folks that are doing work from other marginalized positions that we don't necessarily hold. And learn from folks that are speaking truths that we don't necessarily know from our own embodied experiences. And so we try to think about that with the first point of the 10 principles around intersectionality, and that disability is deeply entwined with other markers of social meaning making, like race, class, and gender, and sexuality and citizenship, and all of those other markers that I've already mentioned before. And so, for instance, we held a 2-day symposium last spring on the intersections between anti-Black racism and disability, and it was a really successful 2-day symposium where we talked about how racism around Blackness and disability are deeply intertwined in this country. And so we really try to think about how ableism and how disability intertwine in those ways, because I think lifting up the voices of folks that are impacted by systems of oppression, and systems of oppression that we might not even experience, even though we too experience systems of oppression, is really important to the work that we do. And we also are continually struggling and grappling with and how to work better to think about collective access and what collective access means and looks like on this campus and beyond this campus, around cross-disability solidarity and cross-movement solidarity, and what that looks like in a sustainable way. And that's all I'll say about that, because I could go on for hours about that. We could have a whole bunch of events about that, but it's something that our group is really working to think deeply about because of how important collective access and what that means, because of how important it is. Yeah.
I also chose number 9 with collective access, and as Angela was saying, it is important to have all of these conversations on our campus, and something that really sticks with me about that definition is that access needs to be articulated, and we can share this responsibility. As I'm learning in one of my classes right now, Richa Nagar has written about this term called radical vulnerability, in which true solidarity only arises in being very vulnerable and conversing with each other on both easy and hard topics. And I think that's something that's very important to consider in campus access and just other topics of intersection, where even though they are difficult, they are in need of being said, and that something much stronger arises out of those.
I'm not exactly sure which of the categories this fits under. Probably collective access and maybe even anti-capitalism. But I just wanted to point out that I've been visually impaired my whole life, and it's been a real struggle as far as being able to do things to the level that other people can do them. And so, for example, like before I came to the University of Minnesota, like I was pretty much stuck in my apartment and had like very terrible transportation issues going to community college for my associates. And basically, like all I did was stay in my apartment and work on schoolwork and then go to class a few times a week. And I was very isolated. I didn't have very many people to interact with. Like anyone I talked to was at the college, and like getting around the town I lived in was really tough. And so when I came to the University of Minnesota, it was a complete 180. Like one of the main reasons I came here is because I really don't have to worry about transportation issues. I can walk everywhere. And so I just want to point out like there's a whole center here, the DRC, devoted to helping people get access to everything on campus, and like how I can walk everywhere, and like I can go to the DSCC whenever I want and be around other people and people with disabilities. Like I've never had this before, and like I can go walk to different places around here and get to classes really easily, is where I couldn't before because transportation was such a terrible issue for me. So I just want to point out the how much access can change things, and like I'm not worried about like access to things on campus as much. I'm really more worried about like outside of campus. That's where things really fall apart in terms of access, because there's things in place on this campus that help access, but there really isn't, in quote unquote the real world. So I just, want to point the huge dichotomy between those two different things.
This is Sarah. I think the principles that stood out most to me were the ones related to intersectionality and recognizing wholeness. I really prefer to view people as individuals and think about all the different identities they have that make up who they are as a person. And I just think it's important for us to be able to think about all of those different aspects of somebody's personality when we're thinking about how best to give them access. And we also need to recognize wholeness, both in thinking holistically about who we are, and also about thinking that we're whole as we are without a treatment or without somebody fixing us. We're whole just as we are. And then the cross-movement solidarity and commitment to cross-disability solidarity really speaks to me as well. We have all of these groups here, and we can join forces to gain momentum and have a bigger impact and to make changes on this campus that hopefully will radiate beyond the campus at some point. And together we can craft new policies and procedures and make things a little bit easier so that people can think beyond their academic career and moving into the work world. How do I take this with me, and how do I do the best I can throughout our lives?
This is Cassidy. I think similarly to what Anthony was saying about just kind of like what is on campus and the education that needs to happen even within just like the departments and whatnot on our campus is really, really important. And I don't really know where it fits in to the 10 principles, but I know there's a lot of departments within the university that often forget disability, which sounds really like, I don't know, it's sad. It's really sad. And trying to be able to point those out in a human way of being like, you need to acknowledge this, you need to change this, because people need it. Not just because like, oh, like, let's make money, which I think, oh God, I could go on. Which I guess also goes with anti-capitalism, but whatever. But it's often forgotten, it's often overlooked, and it's one of the elements of social justice and diversity that affects people day to day in a very physical way. And so for me, I really try to notice those areas where people like you and me get forgotten, where the priority is placed on other marginalized identities. But yeah, that's what I have to say.
I think that leads, sorry, this is moderator Sarah again. I think that leads perfectly into our next question, which is, what is the hardest or most frustrating thing about campus-based disability justice organizing?
I'll go. I think the hardest thing is that it takes forever to make change. You try to educate a department or area on campus and, say, hey, you're forgetting people, you need to figure this out. And then it takes, a million years for them to get anything done. Which, as an undergrad, is disheartening, because I know that after this year I won't be on this campus anymore. But it doesn't mean that my job is done, right? Carry it forward and encourage those who come after me to continue that work. Because, it doesn't stop with me, it doesn't stop with Anthony, it doesn't stop when you leave grad school or professional development or any of that. But yeah, I think that's definitely the most frustrating part, is the amount of time and work it takes for people to recognize us as humans.
Hi, this is Angela speaking. I think that the hardest, most frustrating thing about disability justice organizing on this campus is the lack of broader structural institutional support for disability justice organizing. And I use those terms broadly because, as I mentioned earlier, I think about disability justice organizing quite broadly to include things like support for disabled students, support for disabled and disability curriculum, support for policy changes, support for all kinds, everything that might be included in these 10 principles that we might think about. And I think what happens on this campus is that the administration, and I know I shouldn't bite the hand that feeds me, but they don't feed me very well, so I'm not that worried about it. That a lot of pressure gets put on the Disability Resource Center to be everything, and they're not funded to be everything. And they are amazing, and they do amazing work, and they've done amazing work for me personally. But they cannot be and do everything. So then what happens is students, like those of us up here, step up to be and do all of the other things. We step up to be the support systems. We step up to be the policy innovators. We step up to be the cultural centers. And then the administration says, oh, look at this great cultural center we have led by students. Oh, look at this great policy initiative these students are doing. Oh, look at this great programmatic and curriculum innovation our students are doing. But what they're not realizing is that at other Big Ten institutions like ours, like our peer institutions, they have paid support staff that do everything the people on this panel are doing. And so it's actually an abomination, if that's the right word, if I'm pronouncing them. Abomination, thank you very much. It's actually incredibly embarrassing that an institution of our caliber that wants to dream big and be the discovery and whatever the newest phrase of our administration is actually an embarrassment, I think, that we're a cutting edge institution in so many ways, doing such amazing work. But yet when it comes to disability curriculum, disability activism, disability resources, disability support, supporting disabled scholars and students, we are dropping the ball compared to our peer institutions. And that is just empirically true. If you look at University of Wisconsin, if you look at Indiana, if you look at the UIC, if you look at all of the other institutions, any of the institutions that we can look at, the California systems, if you look, I haven't written the paper yet because I'm busy writing my dissertation, but it's there. We're behind in supporting the system, and you can see it and you can feel it. We can feel it in our body minds, and we can feel it in our colleagues that don't make it to their degrees. And it's not the fault of the DRC, and yet that's who feels the pressure. And they're doing everything they can for us. And so that's what I think is the most frustrating thing about doing this work.
Yeah, I think my frustrations sort of build on that same general theme. As people with disabilities, we already have more on our plates than the average student. And most of us tire more easily than the average person, but yet we are the ones who have to do a lot of this organizing and activism. And with graduate students, it's even worse because we're already so heavily scheduled. And graduate students have to teach, we have to take classes, we have to do research, and then somehow, amongst all of that, we find time to do service work as well. And people are supportive and they want to encourage us, but a lot of graduate students don't feel they have the time to do the service work. And so it's been tough getting enough people to show up sometimes because everyone is just so behind the 8 ball that they aren't able to come to events and they aren't able to give us their time. And I get that, especially those of us who have a lot of medical issues, we feel weak and frail at the end of the day and we need to go home and rest. And that's totally understandable, but it can be frustrating when we have meetings with people like policymakers, people who are in charge who have the ability to change things for us, but I only have the point of view of a few graduate students. So I don't know all of the things I'm missing from the rest of those graduate students who have different disabilities than the few of us who are represented. And then personally, for me, explaining invisible illnesses and disability is very challenging mentally and emotionally. It's a lot of work, and I find myself doing it over and over because people don't understand. They maybe want to understand, but they just haven't been exposed to it, so they ask me a million questions, and that's great, but sometimes I'm really tired of explaining what's with me and why I need things a certain way. That I didn't really choose to be a poster child. It just sort of happened through my activism that I've become someone that the administration will call sometimes. But it's something I've taken on to try to make a difference for myself and for the other graduate students who come to this institution in future years.
This is Oliver. I would build off both of those, that the university is huge. There's a lot of change, and working in the DRC, you just see how much strain we're under to meet all of these needs and to start encouraging other sections of the university to provide this access that we do. And I think sheer size and also burnout of employees and students who are trying to do this bit extra on top of their university, just trying to get through university. People who are coming here to learn to complete their degrees, and they end up doing this extra work because they care, and it's not forced, but it is something that people want to strive to make the place where they think they can learn better for who's to come after them.
So I just have one more question. Again, this is moderator Sarah, but I just kind of want to summarize some of the main themes that I've heard today before I go into this last question, just as a reminder before I ask the last question, and also just kind of as a summary of what we can take away from today's session. So it seems that some of the most important aspects of disability justice to you all is a sense of community and the importance of collective access for all body minds exactly as they are. And it seems that some of the major challenges that we deal with is a lack of disability curriculum and institutional support. And then in addition to that, the amount of time that it takes to create institutional change, if change is made. And then finally, the lack of availability in our busy schedules to be able to work for that change. And so thinking about all that, the final question we have today is, if you could leave, and we will do a Q&A after, but for the final question, if you could leave people with one thing or ask one thing of folks in the audience regarding disability justice on campus, what would that one thing be?
So I'm a queer feminist, which means I usually break all the rules. So I have three things. And they are believe disabled folks, first and foremost. Believe disabled folks whenever they tell you what their truth is. The second thing is to educate yourself, and one of the best places to educate yourself is the Disability Visibility Project. Alice Wong's project is a great place to start. It's an online community. And the last thing is to get involved, even if you are an able-bodied-minded person, get involved with work for access and inclusion for disabled people in whatever spaces that you're involved in, on campus or in your workplace or in whatever department or organization that you're a part of.
I think for me, what I would stress is that we need to continue to reach out to our peer groups and establish ties that will allow us to really drive forward cross-disability solidarity and change that we all want to see on this campus. So we should tell each other what we're working on, work together, and try to build that collective momentum as a team.
I would say that the biggest thing in a nutshell is like never give up. Like keep pushing the boulder up the hill no matter what. Because even if you educate people, they forget. and so then you have to do it again. So just continue to let people know about disabilities, and just because you told someone something once, you may have to keep reminding people, and that I think really is the best way to increase access and inclusion, is to just have people aware of different issues pertaining to disabilities.
This is Oliver. I would say that the biggest thing to remember would be that every bit counts, that we are not all able to do these big things and to challenge institutions and to protest and to work these jobs, but just doing small things, whether it's telling your professor that there's the DRC, or it's letting somebody in your class know that you're there for them, or it is going to these sorts of conversations and just being a presence in a room, that not all action in our collective movement needs to be big or visible, but every little bit counts.
And I think if you are able to fight the system from within the system, it's hard, it sucks, but if you can do it, do it. It needs to be done.
Okay, great. I want to move on to the Q&A portion of the panel. So reminder that there are cards on the table, so feel free to write down any questions that you have. We'll also walk around with a microphone for people who would like to vocalize their question. I just want to look at these questions really quick. Okay, here's a good one we can start with. What can policymakers do to stay connected to your work?
So this is probably something that we are most familiar with, since we are the ones who are kind of actively trying to change policies at the institutional level. So I think the big thing is that they should continue to reach out to us. It's exhausting to continue to try to contact department after department and say, you need to fix this, let's have a meeting, okay, now let's have another meeting, now let's have another meeting. And so if some of that is a two-way street and they try to meet us on that, that is really helpful. That shows that they care and they genuinely do want things to be good here for people with disabilities, and that always means a lot. Like I said, I'm one of 2 students on the Graduate School Advisory Board, and the faculty support there has been tremendous. And also from graduate program coordinators who, there just happened to be one in a meeting, and she went and took all of my points out to all the program coordinators and started talking to them. And it's been really, really a breath of fresh air to have people contacting me and saying, how can we help you get these things done? So if there's anything that you could do, it's make it a two-way street, meet us halfway.
So the CDSC is a listserv, and if you haven't signed up on the back, or if you're not able to sign up in the back, I can help. I can sign you up, or Jessica can sign you up in the back, and we can keep you in the loop on what we're doing. We're currently applying for multiple grants in the hopes of increasing our reach on campus and increasing the scope of what we're able to do on campus in terms of curriculum type events and programmatic and type events, in hopes of eventually expanding what we're able to do on campus. But that's a lot of grant writing, and we may or may not get the grants, so we may or may not be able to expand in those ways. So we are hoping to put pressure in other ways on the institution, but I'm also hoping to graduate and get a job, so I don't know how long I'll be here. So that is how you can stay connected to the CDSC, whether I am a part of it or not, because it is bigger than me. And so there's a sign-up sheet in the back, and we can get you looped into a part of that. Jessica is motioning to me that she will be passing it around. So again, if you need help getting signed into that, please let us know after the panel. You the DSCC has a Facebook group and a Twitter too, yeah, and an email. You have so many things, yeah. So there are ways to stay connected with the DSCC as well, yeah.
Yeah, I'll just repeat that in case you didn't hear what we were saying. The DSCC does have social media. We have Facebook and Twitter, and we do have a newsletter that goes up monthly. We try to do it monthly.
Oh, and of course we have a room in Kaufman, 213. Feel free to drop by. We're open 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. throughout the week.
Can you state what it stands for again?
Yeah, the DSCC is the Disabled Student Cultural Center, and it is open, to undergrad, graduate, professional, staff, faculty. I guess our name is kind of misleading, but anyway.
I have another card here, and this is an interesting question because we recently did some research on this. The question is, what percent of, I guess it's grad students. What percent of, I'm sorry, I read that wrong. What percent of grad students here at the U have a disability? Is this similar or different from other schools? And I just pulled up some statistics on the percentage of undergraduate students with disabilities that I can read off right now, which is that in 2017, 2.1% of students, and this is only students who responded to this campus-wide survey, 2.1% of students reported that they have a physical disability that affects how they access, use campus facilities. 7.3% reported that they have a learning disability that affects how they read, study, and do coursework. And 17.3% reported that they have a psychological disability that affects how they learn or interact with others. So disability is a common experience among undergraduate students. Unfortunately, we don't know from this same data set the percentage of graduate students who have disability because they did not ask that question among graduate students. So this really goes back to Angela's frustration with the lack of institutional support and even consideration that graduate students also have disabilities.
Sarah, I'm sorry, I was talking to the other Sarah. Did you say that they didn't even ask?
They did not ask the question,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. This Sarah and I were consulting while this Sarah was speaking to you, so I apologize for that. We believe that it's something around 1 or 2% report nationally, but we don't know. There's also a lot of stigma around graduate students reporting that they have a disability, a great amount of stigma around graduate students reporting. And we both personally know, and this is anecdotal, so take that as you will, but we know a lot of graduate students that choose not to register with the Disability Resource Center if they can, or at least try to go through as many years as possible without registering because they feel retribution from their departments if they were to register. I've had many graduate students talk to me about that. This is self-promoting perhaps, but I'm going to self-promote anyway. I co-authored a chapter in a book called Negotiating Disability. Disabilities is Disclosure in Higher Education. It came out from Michigan Press in 2017 on what it's like for graduate students in higher education. And my 3 co-authors and I wrote this piece specifically because there is so much or so little written about graduate students with disabilities in higher education. There is a lot for undergrads in higher education, and then there is a lot of work currently being done, particularly by Margaret Price at The Ohio State University on faculty in higher education, but there's not a lot of work on graduate students and how the structures of ableism in higher education work differently or work in particularly nuanced ways for graduate students. And so my colleagues and I wrote a piece about our experiences with that. So for whomever wrote this question about that percentage and why that our piece gets to why it's hard to find those numbers. Again, this is a project I hope to get to. I also know that David Perry, who is in the history department, is currently working on a journalist piece about this and currently doing interviews with graduate students about their experience. So if you're interested in this, you can await David Perry's piece on this exact topic.
This is Sarah from OGPSD again, and I just want to add, I think what Angela has said is very true, is that there are a lot more people with disabilities in the graduate population than we know. We've both had people disclose to us who don't disclose to anyone else, and that's a large part because of the power differential for a graduate student and the research advisor. And this is getting to another sort of problematic issue on this campus, which is that we have some advisors who need some training on how to be better advisors. And so there are a lot of people who will not say anything because if they have a bad relationship with their advisor, that will affect their entire career for the rest of their life. You need that person to be in your corner, you need that person to provide letters of support. And if they think that you're being weak or lazy or whatever kind of stigmas people like to attach to disability, yes, you know, that could haunt you for the rest of your career. And so it's definitely something where we need to be able to enhance the culture to the point where more graduate students feel.
Some examples of what UW-Madison or Indiana is doing. Do you mean disability studies majors, minors?
Yeah, absolutely. So there, when I'm talking about disability studies curriculum or programming, especially at Madison, they have lots of professors, for one, that are out as disabled. And that can serve as mentors. And I know that we have disabled faculty here, but I know that one thing that I, as an out disabled instructor, and I have been teaching for many years now, I think I've been the standalone instructor for 6 years, and my students are often like, you're the only disabled instructor I've had, and I know that that can't possibly be true. I know because I see the posters at the Disability Resource Center of all the other disabled faculty. But I have a lot of disabled students come out to me as disabled. And so a lot of other campuses have disabled faculty, and they have faculty that teach classes on disability studies. And so there's a presence of disability studies on the campus that helps the campus come to understand disability as another difference that is equal of respect and equal of understanding, in the same way we have classes on, say, African American literature or Asian American studies or Hmong culture or indigenous studies or Latinx studies. And so they have minors and programs where they would bring speakers to come speak about, say, disability history and culture. And I know that we have these same programs here, but we don't have it at the same level, the same caliber, the same institutional support that other institutions like Madison have. They have minors, they have majors, they have multiple faculty members, they have conferences, they have multiple faculty members with tenure lines, which might not mean the same to everybody in the room. But tenure lines mean faculties that have jobs that aren't going anywhere. And what that means is it has a culture. It means that there's a culture where disability is taken seriously as a type of difference that's valued, and a type of study that's valued. And a culture that's valued, not an other that we need to fix or cure or eradicate, right? And so that's very valuable for me, because when it's an area of study that can be valued and an area of difference that can be valued as a culture, then that goes hand in hand with access and inclusion and diversity. So then when that culture is built in an academic space in the same way that we can think about other types of difference and types of meaning making, then it makes it easier to have conversations about what, this is why I need an access copy. This is why we need entrances into buildings. This is why we need to have policy changes on the systemic level. It makes other types of conversations easier and other types of policy changes easier when these things go hand in hand. I hope that answered the question. And I'm not saying that things are like peachy keen and everything is wonderful in Madison. I'm sure they have problems at Madison. I'm not like singing the glories of Wisconsin by any means. Please, no one like throw tomatoes at me. I just know that that there are things missing here that I know that we could have that could make life better for us.
Well, I'm going to walk around for any questions in the audience. Anyone would like to vocalize their question, and let me know if you'd like me to hold the microphone for you.
I guess I have a quick question. My question was related to the first question that was asked. I actually asked it, and I guess I was looking more for policymakers as a whole in our state, Minnesota. And so I was wondering if you could answer it more in from the perspective of how could policymakers at the state level be more engaged in the work that you're doing and the work that you want to do in the future.
That's a great question. I might have you repeat it when Sarah is not writing her email down. I think one thing that policymakers could think about doing on a broader educational level is that we need to get better funding for students in general and better funding for education, because one of the biggest things that becomes an access barrier is the push to finish in 4 years, and the university's push to get students to finish in 4 years, and that's one of the biggest things that causes an access issue or an access barrier for disabled students. And the same thing for graduate students. Graduate students are funded for a certain amount of years, and when that funding runs up, then you have to get jobs, or you have to take out more student loans, or you have to drop out. And so the more funding we can have on the more that policymakers in the state level can help bring better funding to the education system for students around the time to degree, and we can push against this time to degree, because time to degree is based on what disability studies calls normate time, right? And so the normate is the person who is normal in every way, right, or meets the norms in every way. And so that would be the opposite of a disabled person. That this time to degree causes so much pressure for everyone. It causes more intense pressure for disabled students. So the more the policymakers can do to provide funding to help ease up the time to degree, I think would be the first thing that comes to mind. So Sarah, if I can repeat the question. Nikki asked what state policymakers could do to help support the work that we're doing on the state level and through policymaker change to support the work that we're doing on campus to help the policy changes we're helping here. Was that close enough?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with Angela that funding is probably the most important thing, because that's the thing we get pushed back on when we say, there's a deadline for degrees, it's not long enough, we need more time. Well, we can't give you funding for that long. So that's a big issue for all graduate students right now, especially with the current presidential administration. But that is important. And I think also at the city level, we do not have very good services for people with disabilities in the Twin Cities. I've heard it referred to as the land that the ADA forgot, because in my neighborhood, they are just finally putting in curb cuts so that they're accessible for wheelchairs, and that was mandated 10 years ago. So we just got them this year. And then things like the Pension Mobility Service, I've not heard very good things about that. It's definitely been an issue for a lot of people. So there are a lot of things we could do citywide that would make things a lot easier for people just getting around, even between campuses and things like that. That there's lots still to be done on, you know, university, city, and state levels.
Kate asked me to bring this up, and it's not a question as much as a comment. For things like going to conferences, the extraordinary amount of expense that a person with a disability, especially a person in a chair, has to deal with. So when Kate goes to a conference, she just went to her national conference, it's $3.50 to take the train in. It's $55 to take an accessible cab. And because we deal with a chair and suitcases, there's no way to take the train. Yeah, I'm sorry. We don't share a room with other graduate students because of personal care needs. She has food allergies, so trying to get food and having to eat out is an increasing expense. We figured, and we're paying 2 airfares. So we figured to go to a conference costs about $2,000, and that makes it pretty prohibitive.
Responses or comments?
I just want to affirm that.
I also have to agree, especially when having a chair almost counts, in not exact terms, but almost, when people have a luggage to focus on, they focus on it. When you have a chair, you have to focus on the chair and then your additional luggage and getting places, and there's a lot of extra steps, and especially with the more different needs you have that require different access, it becomes even less accessible to go to these places that are supposed to be accessible or provide information. And I think that's something that all conferences and all learning institutions or giving of information need to keep in mind, that just because you provide access, you have to also make people able to use that access.
This is Jay from the back. Thanks very much for that comment, Kate. One of the things that I think about in that too is the way in which so much of what happens at conferences for typical attendees happens not necessarily during the sessions, but during the social times and the networking, and that when we are exhausted from needing to, or when we're needing to do personal care tasks that there's not enough time for, and we're missing even the session parts, that it's not the same experience and we're not getting the same professional contacts as other people attending, and that's another piece of how the experience is different, and another place to think about what access means.
Does anyone have a card question that I didn't pick up? Okay, great. Well, thank you all so much for coming today. Hope you enjoyed this panel. Again, reminder to, if you didn't sign in on the way in, please sign in on the way out. And if you'd like to join our listserv, you can add your email. We don't send a lot of emails. We mostly just send emails about upcoming events. So have a great rest of your week, and thanks for coming.
Thank you for